The 2023 Corvette Z06 is finally here, and in this video I'm gonna go over some of the spec and tech of the Z06 and then of course jump into Photoshop for a subtle redesign of the front end. Overall, it's a lot better looking than the C8, and I'm gonna let you know exactly why in just a minute when we compare the front, the side and the rear between the C8 and the new Z06 side by side, going through the entire design to look at all the differences. But there are a few graphic details that just don't make sense to me. That's what I'm gonna talk about and redesign later in this video. Today I'm wearing my brand new 1973 Porsche 911 t-shirt. It came out super comfy and a lot crisper than I expected. If you're interested in one for yourself or a friend, go to TheSketchMonkey.com. Now the Z06 is simply a beast of a machine with tech that I never thought I would see in a brand new sports car today. And I'm talking of course about the brand new naturally aspirated 5.5 liter V8 engine in a 2023 model. That's kind of weird but impressive at the same time that they decided to go with a naturally aspirated engine here. It makes an impressive 670 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque, and you get the power down through an 8-speed dual clutch automatic transmission. Production is set to start next summer. With 670 horsepower, the all-new double overhead cam 5.5 liter V8 sets the record as the most powerful naturally aspirated engine ever to be fitted in a production car. This record was previously held by the 2014 Mercedes-Benz SLS AMG Black Series with its 622 horsepower 6.2 liter V8. However, for the Z06 there is no manual transmission. All you get is the 8-speed dual clutch automatic, and I'm actually okay with that since I think it's the perfect fit for this type of package and what the Z06 is supposed to do. So just like most Ferrari V8s here, the redesigned LT6 engine reaches peak power of 670 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque at the red line. So right at the red line at 8,400 RPM, which should make for an incredible old school driving experience here. GM actually had a naturally aspirated, of course it's naturally aspirated, the Ferrari 458 as a benchmark during the testing, but decided early on to switch it up for the successor of the 458 to the 488. However, the 488 just couldn't compete with the power delivery and noise of the 458. As we all know, the 488 is turbocharged, is not naturally aspirated like the 458, and it didn't take long for the team to switch back and buy another 458 Italia for the testing of the Z06. I think that's a really interesting story, and it kind of emphasizes the importance of having a naturally aspirated engine for the Z06 here. So what about the wheels? The wheels and tires actually sets the Z06 apart in a major way compared to the regular C8. This is a great example. If you want to study how big of a difference the right wheels and tires, the fitment can do for a car, just look at the Z06 and the C8. I'm going to show you this. When we look at both of them side by side, you're going to see the massive difference of how important the right wheels and tires are for the car to look planted and have an overall proper stance connection to the ground. You get 20-inch wheels in the front here and 21 inches in the rear of the Z06, which are forged aluminum wheels. Now you can also option for carbon fiber wheels that are even lighter than the aluminum ones, and they're also faster around the track. Talking about the styling here of the Z06, it also gets a completely different front fascia, as you can see, and the rear is also different here. Small details, but I think it makes huge differences on the design here. And on top of that, you have the typical fender flares that house these massive new tires measuring 275 millimeters in the front and 345 millimeters in the rear. There's no pricing yet for the Z06, but you can expect it to land around $85,000 MSRP. Probably gonna be a little bit of a markup there, but about $25,000 more than the base C8 Corvette. Now, let's jump into Photoshop here and let's look at the differences before I'm going to redesign the front end of the Z06. So let's start with the front here and let's have a look at the standard C8 up top right here, and then you have the brand new Z06 at the bottom. So what I like about the standard C8 here is we have a pretty decent flow of the graphics right here in the front end. You can see that the intakes, they have a solid line going right here and a solid little corner right here dipping down, creating a pretty standard intake shape where you have the frames, the kind of intakes shapes, the framing of these front fascia, it looks pretty simple, very geometrical, and you have a decent line flow right here. If we look at the new Z06 down here, we have a lot going on here. I still think it looks better than the C8, even though there are a lot more graphic features in here. It still looks better for the simple reason that we have these wings here are angled inwards on the C8 Corvette. On the Z06, they're angled outwards like this, and I think the wings angled outwards like this, it makes a huge difference. It just looks more sporty in my opinion, and it looks more sleek, more aerodynamic that way. But what I don't like about the Z06 here is that we have this wing right here. You can see we have a plastic piece or carbon fiber probably, stick it in right here. Then we have this stick it in up here onto the fender, the front fender of the car, which looks kind of a little bit too aftermarket-y for me. It doesn't look like it's well integrated in the shape. I might change that as well. But the biggest problem that I have with the front end of the Z06, if you can call it a problem, but if there is something I would like to change, is this part right here. So let's delete these couple of lines. You see this line right here, it's very irregular. It doesn't really know, and it looks kind of squished, like it's trying to squeeze its mouth, and it doesn't have the space to stretch its face out. So what I want to do in the redesign here is very, very simple, and these are the changes. So first of all, we have this wing right here sticking out. So let's see if this connects to anything in the light or anything in the hood. We have a line sticking out from this wing going up. You can see that it doesn't really connect to anything, and of course it's going to be the same on the other side right here. But if we were to, for example, let's just play around with the idea that we move these wings a little bit further into the center of the car. The reason being, then we're gonna have a nice line flow to this major key line in the hood here. It first stretches on top of the hood and then goes into the LED right here, and then it dips a little bit here and then down here. So what if we move this front wing into that space so that we have a nice line starting all the way back here, middle of the car, stretching into this front fender right here. If we just move it just a little bit inwards right there, of course we're gonna have to do the same on the other side as well. I think that's going to be a subtle change that it's going to, at least in my opinion, be easier on the eye, because we have that beautiful line going through the body, not just the body, but into parts of the graphics, such as the LED light right here, and then that line in itself continues into one of the key graphic features in the lower part of the car down here, which is this wing, which now doesn't connect to anything, which I want to have connected right here. The second change I want to do here, very small change. We talked about this earlier. It looks like it's very squished and that the face doesn't really have enough space to stretch out. So what I want to do is just remove this line here, this curvature, and have it go something like this. So if we have this line here and then connecting down from the top part down to this corner, remove this body part right there. So we have a big intake, and then this is going to look very, very huge if we have the intake like this. So what I want to do is add some type of carbon fiber piece that covers this part, so we have the same kind of openings for the radiator like we have right now. This is not going to change, so we still have the same opening in the front and on the sides, and I think these two changes are going to be, it's just going to make the front end less busy and less cluttered, in my opinion. We're going to have to see when we jump into the redesign later on. Now, this is the side view. This is an interesting view, very interesting, because we have a lot of small changes to the Z06 that still has a massive impact on the design. The biggest change right here is, of course, as you can see, we have a completely new design of the air intake on the side, and I was never a fan of this air intake here, and I've talked about this before when the C8 came out, maybe 2 years ago or something like that. I made a couple of redesigns of the C8. I made a couple of videos just talking about the design, and it looks very busy right here in this side view of the C8, and part of that has to do with the many angles of this intake here. It's just a black piece that's just stuck onto the car, and it doesn't look like it has any connection to the lines. You can see that this line doesn't even connect with this line right here. The ending of this graphic piece doesn't connect with anything, and it doesn't connect with anything up here either. So it looks kind of out of place, in my opinion. It's still an interesting design, because you have the door handle right here underneath. You stick your hand under there, and you have the door handle. So engineering wise, it's a pretty cool solution, but when it comes to design and beautiful elegance and line flow, I'm not a huge fan. So when we look at the Z06 here, a lot better solution for the air intake, in my my opinion, right here. We still have the key part of this where they can't really change, because the engineers would get pissed off if they said we're gonna have to change this part of the air intake, and the reason being that's where the door handle is. So that would mean a lot of redesigning for the engineers and the designers as well. So they kept this part of this intake. As you can see, this part is exactly the same, so engineers are happy. They don't have to reposition the door handle and stuff like that, but everything else is redesigned. And you can see that when we have this design right here, the connection here between the graphic features are a lot more clear than they are in the C8. For example, we have this line now going into, you can see that it continues here now, and then this then continues into the bumper right here. And this part that sticks out right here, let me delete this so you can see it better. This part that sticks back here now, it's like it's trying to reach back to this taillight right here. These two graphic features are now in line. You can have a line between them and they will intersect perfectly. It's like they were connected in some point of time. It's like you're looking at the continents from millions of years ago. You see them kind of starting to separate, and it becomes almost like a puzzle. You can see that some parts did connect at some point in time, and that's what I'm talking about right here. So we have this connection now with this part sticking back to the taillight. I think it's a massive improvement over the regular C8 here, but we still have the problem in the front end where we have this little angle right here, this little horn or a corner there that we don't have on the regular C8. This looks cleaner than the Z06, but that's exactly what we're gonna try and fix here in a second. Before that, let's have a look at the rear view here real quick. And on top we have the regular C8, as you know. At the bottom we have the Z06, and as you can see, there are some changes in the rear as well. I was never a fan of this layout of the C8. The reason being for that is we have all the key graphic elements in line, like vertically in line. The taillight right here, then we have this intake right here, and the tailpipes right there. They're all in line, so it creates a very static looking rear end, specifically when you look at it from a straight rear view. It doesn't really have any dynamic feeling to it, and I was never really a fan of these squared tailpipes either. It just looked pretty cheap to me. So I'm glad that they made these changes here. Now we have the taillight. They can of course not move the taillight. That would be too big of a change for just a Z06 compared to a C8, but they did change static looking, almost squarish outlet here. They made it now more horizontal, more stretchy, so it looks wider than the rear end. Instead of having it be vertical, they now stretched it horizontally, and I think that makes a huge difference in just the appearance and the width of the rear end of the Z06. And last but not least, look at the tailpipes. Compare these to the new Z06 tailpipes right here. This is what you want in a sports car or supercar like this basically is, based on the performance. And of course you have the Z06 massive wing in the rear here, which I think is necessary, because if we look at this C8 right here, we have this inverted dip, so it dips like this. I want to have it be dipped, we have some sort of ducktail that goes up in the rear end and not slope down like this. That was always a weird solution for the design for me, but this wing kind of counteracts this design right here, so we have a massive wing up here, and I think this is one of the cars that definitely benefits from having a huge wing in the rear end. So these small changes, the flattening of this part outlet right here, and repositioning and the redesign of the exhausts in the middle, now we have more of a dynamic feeling here. We can see that it goes down and then it goes in. So with the graphic features, they're all now in different positions in the rear end, which creates a wider rear end visually, and also creates a more dynamic looking rear end when we have different positioning of the key features in the rear end like we have here. Last but not least, we need to talk about the wheels, because this is the perfect image or comparison between the fitment of the wheels. Just have a look at these beautiful carbon fiber wheels here and how well they sit compared to the original C8 right here. These, if I buy this car, if I were to buy this, these would be the first things to go. I can't have a C8 Corvette with the wheel fitment like this, where the wheels sit inside of the body. And as I said, manufacturers can choose to have the wheels actually be almost flush like we have right here, and not on the C8. This is what I want right here. This fitment where you have the wheels actually fill out the entire wheelhouse and also be planted on the ground and be flush with the bodywork. That's a perfect fitment from factory, and these are wheels that I would definitely not switch out, not just because they fit so well, but also because they're super expensive since they're all carbon fiber. fiber wheels. So with that said, let's jump in and continue here in Photoshop. Let me do the small changes in front end and then come back and show you exactly what happened and compare the redesign to the original. So here we are. On top we have the original, in the bottom we have my redesign right here. Simple changes as I said, but if you look at this little piece right here, this piece, this chamfer right here, it has a tiny little dip here as you can see, and it just makes for a natural progression into a graphic feature right here. Not only this little dip in the chamfer there, but on top of that, this light already has the connection to this dip. So with all these features, all these graphical lines and line flow, it just makes sense to have the biggest graphic feature in the bottom part right here, which are these wings, to have them be in line and connected with the other features that we have up top. And that's exactly what I wanted to do here. So now, as you can see, we have this line stretching from the middle of the car right here. This is where this line starts and then just goes down into the light and then into this little graphic feature right here, dip, and then of course down further into this winglet down in the bottom. In my opinion, I think this looks more not subtle, but more harmonious than the top original view right here. It's just a simple little change, and of course it's all a matter of taste, but it was up to me. This is how I would have designed the front end of the Z06. Overall, a very good job by Chevy to put this Z06 out. I'm really happy with the changes that they made, and I think these tiny changes actually made me like the overall design of the C8 in general a lot more, specifically when you look at it from a side view and you have these proper wheels on the car now.